They brought the music on too quickly. Our moderator, Allan Stevo, as well.
Thanks for being with me. So 2 quick questions to warm up the audience. Senator Lummis, Congressman Davidson, how'd you get interested in Bitcoin, and what is it about Bitcoin that you find so special?
Well, I got into Bitcoin after being Wyoming State Treasurer. I was looking for great stores of value. And so my son-in-law, Will Cole, and my daughter introduced me to Bitcoin. And once you buy and you have skin in the game, then you follow it. And the more I followed it, the more I learned about the benefits of having only 21 million Bitcoin ever to be mined. So the benefits of scarcity and some of the other qualities it had has made me a real advocate.
Similar time frame. So I first started paying attention to Bitcoin in 2013. It got a lot of news that year. There were a lot of things going on in the market then. But I started paying attention to the space in the early 2000s because I got into manufacturing. And manufacturing's inherently been international. And as we would move money, you couldn't even move it directly to some places. Like, for example, you would move it to Hong Kong to move it to China, which took a lot of time, a lot of friction, a lot of transaction costs. And you're like, there has to be a smarter way to do this. So you start looking at the history, like, DigiCash, eGold, things like that were precursors. And then being in manufacturing during the financial crisis, we were just trying to, A, survive it, and then B, scale like crazy afterwards because we did survive it. So I kind of missed the moment, the early days, but I love the ability not only as a payment system, but as a store of value, as Cynthia or Senator Lummis highlighted the ability of it to be limited and scarce has a lot of appeal, not just as a payment system.
Awesome. Now, in those tender moments with colleagues of yours, what do discussions with colleagues usually look like around Bitcoin? And what are the colleagues saying? And where are the fault lines? And where's their kind of partisan rancor on Bitcoin and agreement?
Well, the fun thing about Bitcoin is it's very nonpartisan or bipartisan. So it's a great space for those of us who are struggling with some of the other issues that are extremely divisive in Congress. Bitcoin is a great sort of a Switzerland kind of a place for us where we can work on these issues and put aside some of the other political consequences.
Yeah, I mean, the fault lines aren't partisan at all. So, everyone thinks of American politics in left versus right, but the reality is there's also a vertical kind of libertarian, authoritarian dynamic. And so you see people that are more authoritarian. In general, people that love the Patriot Act and want to do mass spying on American citizens or warrantless surveillance, love central authority and control and kind of the whole system of control that the current system has, the current financial system has. And people that are more privacy-based, Fourth Amendment, civil liberties-based, tend to dislike the Patriot Act and like crypto. And that doesn't break along left-right party lines, but it does break in a different way in Congress.
Okay. Senator Lummis and Congressman Davidson, what are you guys going to do to protect the people in this room from overregulation? What are you guys going to do to protect this industry from overregulation?
Go ahead.
Well, so, I'm a Republican, not an anarchist, right? So some of the people in the room are probably rooting for the anarchists to win and for us to do nothing. But look, at the end of the year, if you think about it, Secretary Mnuchin was talking about banning private wallets, right? That's a horrible approach. If we don't protect private wallets, someone's going to try to ban them. If we don't try to fix our privacy laws, I wish, look, as I said, I'm a Republican. I wish the country would take the threat to privacy as seriously as they take the threat to the Second Amendment. Second Amendment, right to keep and bear arms. If people were as vigilant about protecting privacy.
That's true.
Thank you. we'd be in great shape.
So I'm greeted in the Senate with a look of disbelief. Why would I want to talk about Bitcoin? People would just ask, what is Bitcoin? And I try to refer them to books. We're trying to create a financial innovation caucus so we can use it to educate members of the U.S. Senate and their staffs about Bitcoin, its advantages, and why it is just such a fabulous asset to dovetail with the U.S. dollar. It can be the underlying network worldwide to keep the dollar the global reserve currency, but still allow people to transact in a very freedom-loving way, whether you're in Venezuela, where the inflation is outrageous, and you're trying to get your wealth out of the country, you can get it out through Bitcoin. And the United States, if we get to the point where we're experiencing the kind of inflation we've begun to see this year, we may want that alternative as well.
Some of the people in this room, perhaps me included, don't like government too much. We might like you guys, but some of your colleagues we aren't exactly big fans of. And a wise man once said the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. Can you tell me more about why the people in this audience should put any faith in the government's efforts to help?
Personally, I look at Congress, and there's 535 members of Congress, 100 senators. Technically, there are a few other that are part of like Puerto Rico doesn't have a regular member or voting member, but they have representation. So there are enough of us that some level it gives hope to somebody, right? It's hard for me to go, gee, how could you scare 25,000 jobs out of Brooklyn and people in your district love you for it? I would have to be in the witness protection program. But somehow that represents their district, right? My district, that wouldn't work. And so you give voice. This is a tough issue because for a lot of America, this isn't the top issue, right? And no one in Congress, no matter what district, would get reelected just on financial services broadly, let alone a narrow niche in crypto or an even more narrow niche in Bitcoin alone. So the question for Congress is, how can we work together on things we agree with and compartmentalize that and say, all right, we're going to disagree on other things, but let's at least agree to work on the things we agree in. And right now, that's a tough thing to do in Congress. So I think the country has a lot at stake seeing this system work, because when it does work, that's how we became the land of opportunity, right? People from all over the world come here legally, 1 million new Americans every year legally, not to mention other ways. We still do it incredibly well. 4% of the world's population, 25% of the world's GDP, 55% of the world's invested capital in equity markets. But crypto isn't nearly on that scale. And if we don't get it right with the regulatory clarity, the capital is going to continue to flee the United States.
So one of the interesting things that's happened is a perceived competition between the United States and China. And we know that China is putting together the digital yuan, that they are implementing it in several provinces. We understand they intend to roll it out during the 2022 Winter Olympics in China. And we absolutely have to catch up. So first we have to teach our colleagues about digital currency, what the advantages are, why it will help keep the US dollar the world reserve currency, and why it's important that we have Bitcoin underpinning the US dollar as a store of value, just like gold used to be. And once we get that point across, I think we'll start to see things fall into place. I'm hopeful that Congress will respond in a way that will keep us competitive around the globe and keep us the currency that you want to hold, whether you're in Venezuela or Argentina or Eritrea or China.
Senator Lummis and Congressman Davidson, I agree. We definitely need some regulatory clarity. We need to be reminded how well the free market works. So I'm curious, what would it take to announce that for the next 10 years, there will be no government regulation on crypto in the United States?
Well, here's what I'm hoping. Rather than announcing that, here's what I'd suggest. That we announce that we want to make a level playing field so everyone understands what the sideboards are in the sandbox, and that the innovators can continue to innovate in that sandbox, at least knowing what the playing field looks like. So there's certain things we can do that would help unleash Bitcoin to reach some of its full potential, like changing the accounting rules that apply to Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a commodity, and it shouldn't be subject to GAAP accounting rules. And if we would make that change, I think we'd see Bitcoin uplifted as a very important commodity, probably the most important commodity in the country. And that's coming from a cattle rancher.
No, look, I think as the senator highlighted, you know, we've almost been at a point of no regulation over the past 10 years. You know, it's been a decade plus since the white paper, right? So we've seen no real regulatory clarity happen, and what we didn't see is what the United States got right in the 90s. You know, with the Telecommunications Act of 1966 or 1996. We protected innovation in the internet age, and the internet economy flourished. I mean, we still haven't even seen all the use cases of the internet, but we are in the infancy of blockchain broadly. The use cases are all over the place, whether they're in booths here. The architecture for this space is growing dynamically, and if you could do what you said, at least you would stop the bad ideas. But the reality is we need to actually protect the good ideas as well. And so one of the things I've been passionate about is getting just a bright line test to say what is a security and what is not a security. Yeah. Right? This is one of the biggest challenges why the SEC can't move forward on any number of things. They had the no action letters under Clayton. I feel optimistic that Chairman Gensler is going to be able to move forward in providing more clarity through the SEC. But what would really work is if Congress would actually pass a law, and then we could say there is a bright line test. People shouldn't have to kind of look like they're looking at a Jackson Pollock painting as to whether it's a security or not. Like, I don't know, is it really meaning this or not? You know, we should be able to know clearly this is a security or it's not a security, and that's going to attract the capital investment.
And one thing that Warren just said, I think, shows how bipartisan this subject is, because Gary Gensler, the new head of the SEC, was a Democrat appointee of President Biden, and I broke with my party, the Republican Party, to vote for Gary Gensler as head of the SEC because of his understanding of this space, the Bitcoin space, cryptocurrency, the distributed ledger, blockchain, and how they can be useful and restore freedom in our country when it comes to our financial future. So I voted for him.
Speaking of freedom in our country, now, what's the IRS trying to pull? Asking everyone about their involvement in the cryptocurrency industry.
Okay, so this was a question on your U.S. tax forms for those of you that filed U.S. taxes this year. Like me, you probably looked at it and you said, "What? This is really none of your business," right? And frankly, that's the most. So this is the most offensive part of the 16th Amendment, which is the income tax, right? They amended the Constitution to pass the income tax. It's the privacy. It's really not the government's business. Did you get paid a wage? Did you pay someone a wage? Did you buy or sell something? Did you make or lose money? Did somebody give you a gift? Was the gift too generous? All of it, none of your business, right? So we're a little ways away from agreeing to get rid of the 16th Amendment, unfortunately, and changing the IRS to a consumption-based kind of sales tax-oriented system, which would be better because it wouldn't be as insidious on the privacy angle. But this is exactly what they're trying to do with crypto. They did clarify it to say, well, you really only have to answer the question yes if you profited or if you gained or lost money in crypto. So if you bought and hold or held on for dear life, then you don't have to answer yes to the question. But that's not how it's phrased.
I can't follow that act. That was great.
So there's more than just the IRS out there causing trouble. You know, who even has oversight over Bitcoin and who doesn't, and who needs to mind their own business? And even if you guys knew that, how does someone like you or someone like this audience put these Leviathan state government agencies in their place and say, leave us alone?
Well, of course, since it's considered a commodity, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission has authority over it. You had a former commissioner here this morning who really understands it and is, I think, going to be very helpful in guiding those efforts. The SEC will get involved if it's bundled and becomes a security, but as Warren said, we need some clarity about what is and is not a security. You have some states involved. My state of Wyoming, for example, has passed the first and best in the nation state laws to have special purpose depository institutions. Two of them have been chartered, Avanti and Kraken, and now we're trying to get approval from the Fed for them so they can get those ABA routing numbers and the master agreements. So that is a state innovating. And as a former state legislator and state official, states are the incubators of innovation when it comes to government. You're the incubators of innovation when it comes to business and using this. But when you want to harness what you have and use it, states are a great place to go. My state was very receptive, passed the laws, got the examination manuals to the Fed, and now they're studying it. And so that kind of innovation is good for Bitcoin.
Yeah. Look, Wyoming's been great on tax. They've been great on crypto broadly, and hopefully Ohio will follow suit soon, and so will other states. And unfortunately, the Congress is mostly good at, you know. They're good at preserving the status quo, right? They're pretty good at preserving the status quo, which is a very polite way of saying they don't really get much done, right? So we're hoping to get our colleagues productive on this issue because it's not a partisan issue. It's something we can find common ground on, and we can do it. It'll be good for America. It'll be good for certainly a lot of people in this room, but it'll be good for consumers. If you think about normally, you have people who, if they're victims of fraud, you pass laws to protect victims of fraud. And we've seen bad actors in this space. Unfortunately, some of our colleagues have anchored in their mind the bad actors. They won't take that action yet to say, you know, we should do something to protect the investors by providing clarity. And that's what states like Wyoming have done better than other states. And hopefully we'll get something across the finish line in Congress. In the meantime, we are, as we both share the hope, because you know, Chairman Gensler does actually see, he understands the issue to the point where he could teach classes at MIT for free on the topic, which is more than most people in the space. And when we get the regulatory clarity coming out of those agencies, hopefully we can get off of this regulation by enforcement, which probably scares off a lot of capital and a lot of innovation. So, you know, a good system of government does that. It attracts the innovation and the investment. And that's part of the secret sauce that America has been able to find over the years. Hopefully we can find that on this issue.
So Senator Lummis and Congressman Davidson, the U.S. banking system, it's really put a lot of work into keeping decent folks unbanked. And there really are a lot of underserved communities who are basically treated as non-people by the U.S. banking system, and they're kept out. And I mean, establishment cancel culture came for some of these people decades ago. And there's so many Bitcoin companies trying to change that dynamic, but all they get is hate from Washington, D.C., especially from the politicians who are supposed to be so woke and in love with the poor. So what gives?
Well, it's my personal feeling that banking is really worried about having their business model change so dramatically by Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies that they're reacting in fear. And when all of us, when we're getting into the unknown, and we think it's going to change our livelihoods, our existence, our business model that we've been comfortable with, would probably react in fear. So what we need to do is work with the banks to help them understand how significantly Bitcoin can advance their ability to do same-day settlements, to do more direct settlements, and make their banking lives more efficient and reduce their risk. But in addition, for the unbanked, just think, if you have a cell phone, you can be your own banker. And that's what Bitcoin does for unbanked communities, people on Indian reservations, people in poor neighborhoods. If they are not banked, they can be their own banker using their cell phone. And that is one of the great egalitarian, wonderful things about Bitcoin that I'm so excited about.
Yeah. If you think around the world, I mean, one of the things that part of some of this innovation for the unbanked and underbanked is flourishing in Africa, because they don't have the big regulatory framework to kind of block the innovation. And there are people, even not with smartphones, just with SMS, being able to become banked, being able to establish an identity, being able to prove who they are by their payment history and transaction history. And look, data arbitrage has made a lot of billionaires over the past 20, 30 years. Yeah. You know, there's some interesting art back there where, you know, one of the guys, I won't promote him, you could probably walk through it, but talking about how, you know, the surveillance state is basically tracking you from cookies, every way they can surveil you. And that gets to the government's role. I mean, the current financial system, whether it's the Know Your Customer laws, the Anti-Money Laundering, Bank Secrecy Act provisions, all of the warrantless surveillance systems that are out there, not to mention the fact that we will not yet pass a privacy law for the big data companies. They collect an identity on people. And sometimes that identity is being able to use, including artificial intelligence and facial recognition, to filter people from access to this remarkable American economy because they don't participate in it the way it's currently structured. Bitcoin and truly distributed ledger technologies that don't have a central authority to be able to run the spy operation, to be able to filter the transactions or other things, really offer hope to do that the right way, which is restore some level of privacy. Not secrecy. We all know there are companies that can follow things on a distributed ledger and get to the root of it, just like some of the things we've seen already out of the Colonial Pipeline situation. So I think that's the big part, is we have to protect the nature of true distributed ledger. We have to restore privacy to it, and then you can protect the unbanked and underbanked in a way that is a little bit outside of the current system. And that's part of the reason that they are unbanked and underbanked, is they don't fit well with the current system. They don't have the credit history, the payment history, or the identity established that would give them access to the current system.
And Warren just mentioned something that's really immediate and important, and that was the ransom that was paid on the pipeline was paid in cryptocurrency. And so people in Washington that are suspicious of cryptocurrency then associate it with criminal activity. In fact, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal right after that ransom was paid that says, well, basically the solution to this is to do away with cryptocurrency. And obviously, there's so much more fraud in regular fiat currency than there is in cryptocurrency. So Warren and I and our colleagues have our work cut out for us, trying to help educate our colleagues about ways in which that kind of use of Bitcoin can be ferreted out, discovered, and revealed, and yet preserve the privacy and security of those of you who are using it in a non-nefarious way.
Senator Lummis and Congressman Davidson, that last comment goes nicely to another question. You know, I hear lots of experts say that Bitcoin should be banned because, you know, criminals use it a lot. Also, it seems like some people believe Bitcoin causes narco-terrorism. And, you know, I agree criminality is a bad thing. The data, however, indicates the #1 currency for hackers, narcotics traffickers, the #1 currency for human traffickers, the #1 currency for terrorists, the #1 currency for jaywalkers is not Bitcoin, but the Federal Reserve note, the US dollar. Can you tell me, for the good of society, is anyone in Washington, D.C. trying to ban the Federal Reserve?
Well, Ron Paul spoke earlier, and obviously he had an end the Fed kind of mantra that caught on with a lot of folks. I don't know anybody currently trying to actually end the Fed. We're at least trying to audit the Fed. So that's kind of where the state of play is right now.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
And now some people in this room know how to use cryptocurrency so well that government would never be able to lay hands on their assets. Even Bitcoin, they know how to use that well. And when they look at Washington, D.C., they laugh because they know that technologies like Bitcoin and 3D printing make Washington, D.C. irrelevant. Now, what do you say to those people?
I would say you're wrong. And that's because the job of government is to protect your civil rights. It is to protect you, to implement the Bill of Rights, all of them. And if government is functioning properly, it is protecting your individual rights, and that's why it's the best government on earth.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to the founding documents for our country, it was created distinctly. I mean, it recognized that rights come not from government, but divine, you know, or state of nature for the atheists in the crowd. But our founders looked at it as from our Creator, a divine gift that we have. And they basically, for the reason of protecting one person from another person, governments are rightly and lawfully instituted. And that's really a very limited purpose. What we've seen is this massive growth of government. If you look at the white paper, part of the reason I love what Satoshi Nakamoto wrote in the white paper, it gets back to that piece. And if you really truly want to defend freedom, we have to get this right. We have to defend sound money. And that involves defending privacy, and it involves defending scarcity. And if we don't do that, you're looking at an anarchistic world. Now, some people view that as utopia, but the reality is anarchy doesn't work well because somebody else uses power to attack those who don't have power, right? And our government was created kind of differently, is to protect the vulnerable from those who would do them harm. It really is the embodiment, in my opinion, of a non-aggression principle of saying, no, we're not going to allow one aggressor to attack another aggressor, another person, and if we get it right. I think we're way off course as a country from that.
Yeah.
And that's where, you know, we find common ground, and frankly, some of our colleagues do on the left. They would be more libertarian and lean to the left on some things, but Senator Lummis and I lean to the right.
Yeah. Warren and I are very concerned about printing dollars that have nothing to back them up, the 28 going on $30 trillion in debt that has been issued. It's demoralizing, and in my view, it's anti-American to destroy our currency in that way. So while we're going to continue to fight for fiscal sanity and fight to save the US dollar, I am so relieved that Bitcoin came along so it can underpin the US dollar. And if we go off the rails completely, Bitcoin will be there, and it can be the standard.
Yeah, so, to highlight that, look, the House last summer, I created the Sound Money Caucus, right? Because we were already looking at how, as I said yesterday on the Bitcoin ETF panel, the Fed is basically Dogecoining the US dollar, right? There's a benefit to scarcity that the Dogecoiners don't apparently get, nor does the Fed, right? So that's one of the keys that we have to get right if we're going to do America right. We have to defend sound money if we're going to defend freedom, and that's what America is really supposed to be all about.
Could I do a quick informal poll? Maybe I could hear, maybe you could vote with a sound, something like a boo or something like that. How many people in this room have had a bank account closed because of their Bitcoin activity, or have been fearful that they might have a bank account closed because of their Bitcoin activity? Any boos for that one? Okay, a few people. Senator Lummis, Congressman Davidson, in 2013, 2014, 2015, there was something that would happen constantly and that all people who ran legit Bitcoin businesses in the United States knew about. If a bank got a hint of a customer using Bitcoin, they were relentless in shutting down accounts. Money would be stuck for weeks or even months. Family members who had no Bitcoin exposure would get accounts shut down. Business partners with other non-crypto businesses would get blackballed. It was a nightmare. Years later, it came out that the Obama administration had quietly and illegally used the FDIC to wage a war on Bitcoin and called it Operation Chokepoint. What can you tell this audience about Operation Chokepoint that they might not already know?
Yeah, so look, you highlighted it was illegal, what they did. They had a code word for it, Operation Chokepoint. It was an operation for sure. It was organized. No one's really been held accountable for it, which is a problem in my opinion. They should, because they broke the law. They abused our system. And this is the thing, right? It wasn't just Bitcoin. It was all kinds of other things. And it really fits with the whole kind of what has evolved now to be cancel culture. But it was formally, it wasn't just private citizens saying, yeah, I don't want to do business with you or whatever. It was, look, unfortunately, our country has a very sad history, particularly with financial institutions, saying, essentially, you're not going to bank those people, are you? Now, who those people are has changed over time. A lot of times in history, it was pretty racist. That was a practice known as redlining. But under Operation Chokepoint, it wasn't, necessarily race-based. It was, well, we don't like Bitcoin. We don't like firearms. We don't like marijuana businesses, for example. So recently I worked with, bipartisan group of colleagues to get the Safe Banking Act across the finish line in the House, which says, look, if marijuana is legal in your state, which it is for the vast majority of states, some level, whether it's recreational, medical, or something in between, then the banking regulators can't come in and backdoor make it illegal, right? You had to fight up front. If you said, hey, I'm totally opposed to it, fine, but you lost on the front end. You can't go on the back end and just try to backdoor make it illegal. And that's essentially what they're trying to do with Operation Chokepoint. So in that Safe Banking Act, we got through some of the protections to make sure that the Operation Chokepoint isn't replicated by bank regulators anymore anywhere in the United States of America. But the big thing to do there is to make sure that people are held accountable, government officials are held accountable when they do break the law and, frankly, infringe other American citizens' civil liberties. And the problem, people should actually be fired for sure, but should actually be prosecuted for criminal conduct when they do that, and that's been a problem.
Yeah.
So is the current regime going to bring back this war on Bitcoin?
Well, I mean, there's been a lot of optimism, frankly, when Janet Yellen was the chair of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve had said that the Faster Payments Initiative, which was one of their pieces, was going to stay in the private sector. Under Chairman Powell, they kind of took that over. So a lot of invested capital went into this faster payment system. Some of it was crypto-based, some of it was related to Bitcoin. And so we thought, well, maybe Janet Yellen will come in and defend that. Now, she's had some alarming statements since then, so we'll see. At the end of the Trump administration, I think most of us in the room were very alarmed that they were going to try to ban private wallets. Very, very bad idea. And so, to be determined. I think that's why it's so important that the senator and I get some laws that actually protect this space, because you don't want to be vulnerable to just executive action, governing by a cell phone and PIN, no matter how righteous the cell phone and PIN are.
Yep. Good point. I think there is a place for legislation when the regulators start making it difficult for you to do business. Congress needs to step in. So that's why when you go back to your earlier question, when you said, would we agree to not legislate in this area for 10 years? Probably we wouldn't agree to that, because we want to make sure that as the regulators implement rules and regulations that affect you, that they're not going to impair your ability to innovate. And if we have to step in to allow you to continue to innovate, I believe we will. I think there are getting to be enough members of Congress that are at least aware of the innovation that you're providing, and that it's going to be beneficial in the future, and that we can't stop it. Why would we want to stop it? So I think I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic about the future of regulation through laws and through regulation.
Did anyone here ever see this really cool exchange in New York where you could people would come from all over the world? It was right next to New York Stock Exchange, and all kinds of cool stuff would happen there. Anyone ever see that? Okay, few people, excited people. I watched the New York Bitcoin industry turn from a thriving and prosperous thing to a near desert when the New York Bit license came into place. Thank you, Benjamin Lawsky. May your name never be forgotten. Now, the damage is still apparent to this day. And how do we know that Washington, D.C. won't pass some silly, bankster-friendly Bitcoin legislation and turn the whole country into a Bitcoin desert by chasing the industry offshore?
Well, it's a good question. Frankly, it's a big concern. That's why it was kind of a miracle, in a way, that the internet flourished here, right? It could have just as easily flourished other places in the world. And then you say, wait, what else flourished here? Well, pretty much everything since the industrial age has flourished in the United States. It's not that other places in the world aren't full of smart people, and frankly, a lot of the smart people around the world come to America to do their smart things, because we do have a history of getting it right. Against all odds, against human nature, a lot of times, against people that sometimes are malicious and trying to protect their own interest. Current banking system folks, for example. Current deep state surveillance people, for example. But against all odds, America has been the last best hope for innovation. I mean, we have the best markets for goods, services, capital, intellectual property. I mean, look at all the things that have flourished here. We're not the only country to figure out how to fly, so why does so much happen here? We are home to innovation. We have to get our intellectual property protections right. And frankly, we have to do a good job in the global community of holding countries accountable who violate intellectual property of others. China, for example, comes to mind. And if we do that, we're going to see this flourish here. We have to get it right. And look, the market will tell you when you get it wrong. So if you do mess it up, like bit license, you would hope that there'd be enough humility to go, oh yeah, we messed that up. So far that hasn't happened in New York. You know, when you see, I don't know, Miami seems pretty popular lately, right?
Yeah.
The capital's going to move. Thankfully, not all of it left the country. Some of it came to Miami. A lot's going to Austin. Nashville's doing well. I'd encourage you to come to Ohio soon.
Well, I don't want our time to expire without saying I am really optimistic about your future. I think it's critical what you're doing for our country because you're protecting freedom, you're protecting the Bill of Rights, you're protecting value, you're protecting retirements for people who want to save so they can retire someday and have something of value. And you're learning of new creative ways to provide services around this store of value. So, Warren mentioned he has a caucus in the House. I have a caucus in the Senate called the Financial Innovation Caucus. It is bipartisan. I co-chair it with Senator Kyrsten Sinema from Arizona. And it's going to have three components. One is to educate members of the Senate and their staffs about Bitcoin, about its potential, and about what we can do to allow it to continue to advance its potential. Then we want the regulators to participate, so they too are doing things that allow you to reach your full potential while still having consumer protection and preventing nefarious uses. And then thirdly, we want the innovators in the room because we want to know that we are not inadvertently making it difficult for you to continue to innovate. And if we continue this dialogue, I believe the future of Bitcoin in the United States is extremely bright, and that you don't have to look to other jurisdictions for your future. Your future is right here.
Politicians always need support. So audience members, if you like what you're hearing on stage, sign up for their newsletters, retweet their stuff, and send them money. Senator Lummis, Congressman Davidson, in this audience right now, we have 8-year-olds and 80-year-olds. We have entrepreneurs, we have lawyers, we have technicians, we have traders. How can this audience be helping you?
Well, I would ask you, tell us what your concerns are about regulation, about legislation. And it's not helpful if you say, I'm afraid you're going to ban Bitcoin. I'd rather hear you say, for example, GAAP accounting rules don't work for Bitcoin. Here's why it should be treated like a commodity for accounting purposes. That kind of thing is really helpful. I also want to hear your stories of innovation. And those of you who are very good at helping take the complicated concepts that you understand so well and put them in the language of mere mortals like me, it's really helpful to us to explain to our colleagues what you're doing to innovate. So you can go to @SenLummis, S-E-N Lummis, or you can go to @Senator Sinema, and you can communicate with the Financial Innovation Caucus. We will only be as good as you help us be. Because at my age, the things you're doing are so cutting edge, so sophisticated, that I have trouble understanding them and explaining them to others. But you can help us do that. So I just want to thank you for the opportunity to be here, be among you, learn from you, and thanks for everything you're doing.
Yeah, so similar. I always consider this a two-shift job. The first shift is the official, stuff that takes place at the Capitol, policy making job. Second shift is, as you alluded to, the fundraising political part. I'll just stay on the first shift answer. Everyone understands there's a second shift part to the job. My first shift Twitter feed is @WarrenDavidson. So we're going to post something about this panel today. And basically, I'm just going to say, hey, share, what do you want our colleagues to know? We go to meetings. I always say when I sit in meetings in my district, whether it's with a hospital administrator, law enforcement, a family dealing with a tragedy, whatever the issue is, a local community trying to get funds for an infrastructure project, what would my constituents want me to say if they had this meeting? If they could be in the room, what would they want to say? So if you could be, in the House Financial Services meeting or in the Senate Banking Committee, what would you want me to share on your behalf? How would you want to break this down so that my colleagues could understand it? Because some of them just don't.
Yeah.
It's just an ignorance thing. It's not
Yeah.
that they're hostile to it. They just literally don't understand it, and it's not their top priority. So we're just going to ask for feedback. It'll be @WarrenDavidson. Share that. Share it with good ideas, and maybe the good ideas that you share or the concerns you share will help us help our colleagues, which will help us get something across the finish line.
Yeah.
Okay, Senator Cynthia Lummis here, Congressman Warren Davidson. If you like what they had to say, please send them off the stage with your warmest applause.
Thank you.
Thank you.